"You've got 72 hours to get out of my property," Claire Dawson said, her voice sharp enough to cut through the quiet afternoon air before I even reached my front porch. And the strange thing wasn't the threat. It was how certain she sounded, like she'd already won. The crunch of gravel under my boots echoed louder than usual as I walked up my own driveway, the late Texas sun bouncing off her oversized sunglasses, turning her into a silhouette of authority she hadn't actually earned. Not really. But you wouldn't know that by the way she stood there, clipboard tucked against her chest like a badge, two uniformed officers lingering just behind her with that patient, neutral stance cops use when they think it's just another neighborhood dispute. The air smelled faintly of fresh-cut grass and something floral. Her perfume, probably expensive, probably chosen to match the image she worked so hard to project. And underneath it all, that dry, electric tension you can almost taste when something's about to snap. I stopped a few feet short of the steps, keys still in my hand, taking in the scene like I hadn't seen it coming. Like this wasn't exactly where she'd been steering things for weeks. Claire Dawson, president of the Willow Creek HOA, queen of matching mailboxes and perfectly trimmed hedges, standing on my lawn like she owned the ground beneath her heels. She lowered the clipboard just enough to look at me over the edge, lips pressed into a tight, satisfied smile. "You've ignored multiple violations," she continued, loud enough for the neighbors peeking through blinds to hear every word. "Unauthorized vehicle, improper exterior maintenance, failure to comply with community standards." Each phrase landed like it had been rehearsed, polished, weaponized. One of the officers shifted his weight, boots scraping lightly against the concrete, radio crackling with distant chatter. I could feel their eyes on me, waiting for a reaction, expecting denial, maybe anger. That's usually how these things go. But I didn't say anything. Not yet. The porch light above me flickered on automatically as the sun dipped lower, casting long shadows across the siding I'd intentionally left a little rough around the edges. Claire noticed that too. I saw it in the way her gaze lingered, cataloging flaws like they were trophies. "This property," she said, tapping the paper with one manicured nail, "is subject to HOA enforcement, and as of today, you are in noncompliance. This is your official notice of eviction." The word hung there for a second, heavy and deliberate. Eviction. From the house I'd been quietly living in for the past 3 months. From the neighborhood she thought she controlled. A breeze moved through the street, carrying the faint hum of a lawn mower somewhere down the block, the rhythmic buzz almost calming if you ignored everything else. I glanced past her for just a moment, noticing the subtle details most people would miss. The way the officers hadn't stepped forward yet, the way Claire's grip on the clipboard tightened just slightly, like she was bracing for something. She thought this was the final move. She thought showing up with paperwork and a couple of uniforms would be enough to push me out. And maybe, to anyone else, it would have been. I shifted my weight, the wood of the porch creaking softly beneath my step as I moved closer. Close enough now to see the fine print on the document she was so proud of, the ink still fresh, edges crisp. My reflection stared back at me in her sunglasses, calm, steady, unreadable. I could hear my own heartbeat, slow and controlled, like it always got when things mattered. Claire tilted her head slightly, expecting resistance, maybe a plea, maybe an argument she could shut down in front of an audience. Instead, I just looked at her, then at the officers, then back at the paper she was holding like it was the final word. And that's when I realized something almost funny about the whole situation. She had no idea who she was trying to evict. Not even close. I let the silence stretch just long enough to make her uncomfortable, just a fraction of a second longer than people usually tolerate, and I watched it happen in real time. That tiny shift in her posture, the way her shoulders tightened like something did not line up the way she expected, but she recovered fast. People like Claire always do. They have spent years perfecting that mask, that polished control, that illusion of authority built on paperwork and confidence. The officer on the left cleared his throat quietly, the sound dry and neutral, like he had seen this scene play out 100 times before, homeowner versus HOA, clipboard versus keys, and he was just waiting to see which side would break first. I finally reached out and took the paper from her hand, the edge of it crisp against my fingers, still warm from the printer, still carrying that faint chemical smell of fresh ink. And I read it slowly, not because I needed to, but because I wanted her to watch me do it, to feel that control slipping 1 second at a time. 72 hours. Non-compliance. Immediate action required. The language was aggressive, confident, full of legal tone but light on actual substance, the kind of document designed to intimidate, not to hold up under pressure. I had seen this exact format before, more times than I could count, just not from this angle. A car door slammed somewhere down the street, sharp and echoing, followed by the distant bark of a dog. The neighborhood still pretending to be normal while this little performance unfolded on my front lawn. Claire crossed her arms, her bracelets clinking softly as they settled against each other, a small impatient rhythm that told me she was waiting for me to react, to argue, to give her something she could shut down. "You understand the terms, correct?" she said, her voice dropping slightly, more controlled now, less theatrical, like she was shifting from show to execution. I folded the paper once, clean and precise, and held it between my fingers while I looked past her again, noticing the subtle details that mattered more than anything she was saying. The patrol car parked at the curb, engine still idling, the sunlight reflecting off the windshield in a steady glare, the officers still holding position instead of stepping in, waiting, always waiting. That told me everything I needed to know about how far this had actually gone. "You filed this yourself?" I asked, my voice calm, steady, almost casual, and that was the first moment her expression flickered. Just for a second, just enough to confirm what I already suspected. "The association approved it," she replied quickly, too quickly, chin lifting just a fraction higher, as if that added weight to the statement, as if saying it louder made it more real. I nodded slowly, like I was processing it, like I was just another homeowner trying to keep up with rules I did not understand, and I let my gaze drift toward the street where a curtain shifted in one of the front windows across the way. Someone watching, probably recording. This neighborhood loved its little dramas as long as they did not involve them directly. The porch light hummed faintly above me, a low electrical buzz that most people would never notice, but I always did. Small systems, small signals, everything working exactly as it was designed. Claire stepped closer, closing the gap by about 2 feet, heels clicking against the concrete with a sharp, controlled rhythm. "You have had multiple opportunities to comply," she said, her tone tightening again, that edge of authority coming back stronger now, like she needed to re-establish it before it slipped any further. "This community has standards." There it was. Standards. The word she used like a weapon, like a shield, like it justified everything she had done over the past few weeks. The letters, the warnings, the little public comments during HOA meetings I had quietly attended without introducing myself, sitting in the back row while she talked about maintaining value and protecting the neighborhood. I remembered the first time she noticed me there, the way her eyes narrowed slightly, cataloging me the same way she was doing now, trying to place me, trying to decide where I fit in her system. What she never realized was that I had been there long before she ever looked up from that podium, just not in a way she could see. I turned the paper over in my hand, letting the silence build again, letting her stand there in it. And for the first time since she walked up my driveway, I saw something real slip through the cracks, not fear, not yet, but uncertainty, thin and sharp and growing. She thought this was the end of the process. She thought she had reached the final step. What she did not understand was that she had just walked into the beginning of mine. The thing about people like Claire is that they do not start with eviction notices, they build toward them, layer by layer, small enough at first that no one questions it. And I had watched every single step like clockwork from the moment I moved in, back when the paint on this place still smelled faintly fresh and the mailbox had not yet been corrected to match her approved shade of black. The first letter had been almost polite. A thin envelope slipped under my door while I was out, edges slightly bent from the heat, warning me about my truck being inconsistent with community aesthetics, even though it was parked entirely within my driveway, completely legal, completely ordinary. I remember standing there that evening, the hum of cicadas filling the air, reading her words while the sky turned that deep orange you only get in late summer, and thinking how precise it all felt, like someone testing the boundaries. I did not respond. Not because I did not care, but because I wanted to see how far she would go without resistance. The second notice came 3 days later, thicker paper, more formal tone, citing grass height measured to the fraction of an inch, which meant she had either stood out here with a ruler or had someone do it for her. both options telling me exactly what kind of control she liked to maintain. By the end of the first week, my name was on the community board, printed in bold under non-compliant properties, right between a faded announcement for a garage sale and a flyer about a lost golden retriever. I saw it the morning I walked past the clubhouse, the smell of chlorine from the pool drifting across the pavement, and there she was inside, behind the glass, talking to someone with that same composed smile, like she was managing a business instead of a neighborhood. That was the first time she looked directly at me, really looked, and I could see the calculation happening behind her eyes, trying to categorize me, trying to decide if I was going to be a problem or an easy correction. I kept walking. The meetings were where it escalated. Every second Tuesday at 7, folding chairs set up in perfect rows, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead, and Claire at the front with her binder, flipping pages like she was reading from a script she had written years ago. I sat in the back every time, quiet, unnoticed by most, just another homeowner blending into the background, while she spoke about standards and values and preserving the integrity of the community. Then she started mentioning my address. Not my name at first, just the house number, like it was a case study, an example of what happened when rules were ignored. People turned, just slightly, just enough to connect the dots, and I could feel the shift, the subtle distancing that happens when someone is labeled as a problem. The third week, she said my name out loud. Ethan Cole. Clear, deliberate, like she wanted to make sure everyone heard it. That was the moment it stopped being about compliance and became something else entirely. I remember the sound of the air conditioning kicking on right after she said it, a low mechanical hum filling the room while she outlined the repeated violations, her voice steady, controlled, never raised, because she did not need to raise it, not when she believed she had the authority behind it. What she never realized was that every notice she sent, every meeting she documented, every word she put in writing was doing something she did not intend. She was building a record, a very detailed, very official record, and I was letting her do it. By the fourth week, Claire was no longer pretending it was routine enforcement. The tone of her notices had changed, sharper, more deliberate, like she had decided I was not just another homeowner, but a problem that needed to be solved, and she was going to solve it in front of everyone. I remember the morning the certified letter arrived, the envelope thick and stiff in my hand, requiring a signature like it carried real weight, and for most people, that alone would have been enough to make them nervous. The paper inside smelled faintly of toner and heat, like it had been printed in a hurry but designed to look official, full of legal phrasing, sections, subsections, references to bylaws that most residents had probably never read. I stood there on my porch reading it while the sprinkler system across the street hissed in steady intervals, water catching the sunlight in thin arcs, everything looking calm while the pressure quietly built underneath. She had escalated it to fines now, daily penalties stacking on top of each other, numbers that sounded intimidating if you did not understand how they were structured, how fragile they actually were when you looked closely. $50 a day, then 100, then compounding administrative fees, a phrase that looked impressive on paper but collapsed under the slightest legal scrutiny. I did not respond. Again, instead, I started noticing the patterns. The timing of her letters, always early morning or late evening, just outside normal business hours. The way she CC'd the same two board members every time, building a trail, making it look unanimous even when it was clearly driven by one person. The way she copied sections of the bylaws without including the paragraphs that came right after, the ones that limited her authority. That was my favorite part. The omissions. They told me more than anything she actually wrote. The next HOA meeting was different. You could feel it before it even started. The room was fuller, chairs pulled in from the storage closet, people whispering in small clusters, that low buzz of anticipation that comes when a quiet situation turns into something public. I took my usual seat in the back, the metal chair cold against my shoulders, the faint smell of cleaning solution lingering in the air from earlier that day. Claire walked in a few minutes later, heels clicking against the tile floor, binder in hand, posture straight, expression set like she had already decided how the night would end. When she called the meeting to order, her voice carried further than usual, confident, controlled, every word measured. She moved through the agenda quickly, almost too quickly, like she was trying to get to something. Then she got there. My address again, this time with numbers. Total fines accumulated. Pending enforcement action. Possible eviction. Proceedings. She said it like it was already happening, like it was inevitable, like the outcome had already been signed somewhere I could not see. Heads turned again, more openly this time. People no longer pretending they were not listening, and I could feel their attention settle on me, waiting for a reaction, waiting for something to break the script she had built. But I stayed still, hands folded, eyes forward, just listening. Because every word she said, every claim she made in that room, was being documented, not just by her, but by me, by the system she believed she controlled. After the meeting, she approached me for the first time, not as a speaker addressing a room, but directly, up close, close enough that I could smell that same expensive perfume, sharp and clean, masking something colder underneath. "You are running out of time," she said quietly. No audience now, just the two of us standing under the fluorescent lights. I nodded once, slow, deliberate, like I was taking it seriously, like I was finally starting to feel the pressure she had been applying for weeks. And that was exactly what she needed to see. Because the more confident she became, the further she pushed, the clearer the line became between what she thought she could do and what she was actually allowed to do. And that line was getting very close. The next morning started quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that feels intentional, like the neighborhood itself was holding its breath, and I could tell before I even stepped outside that something had shifted overnight. The air was cooler, a faint breeze moving through the trees, carrying the soft rustle of leaves and the distant hum of a garbage truck 2 blocks over. But what stood out was the envelope taped directly to my front door, centered at eye level, impossible to miss. Bright white, bold lettering, stamped with the HOA seal like it meant something official beyond what it actually was. I peeled it off slowly, the adhesive resisting just enough to make a sound, a soft tearing that echoed louder than it should have in the stillness of the morning. Inside was thicker paper again, more formal, more aggressive, and this time, there was no attempt at politeness. Final notice. Immediate compliance required. Failure to vacate premises within 72 hours will result in forced enforcement action. The language had escalated from suggestion to certainty, like she had crossed some internal line and decided there was no going back. I stood there reading it while the sunlight crept across the driveway inch by inch, warming the concrete under my feet, and I could feel eyes on me before I even looked up. Across the street, the same curtain shifted again, just a fraction, someone watching, probably the same person from yesterday, maybe more now. Word traveled fast in places like this, especially when someone like Claire made sure it did. I folded the paper carefully, same as before, precise, controlled, and slipped it into my back pocket before walking down the steps, the wood creaking softly under my weight. Halfway to the mailbox, I noticed the small details she thought I would miss. A notice posted on the community board at the corner, larger than before, my name printed in bold with the word eviction underneath, like a headline. Someone had taken the time to underline it in red marker. That was new. The sprinkler system kicked on again, water hitting the pavement with a steady rhythm, and for a second, everything looked almost normal if you ignored the paper in my pocket and the way the entire block seemed to be quietly observing. By noon, the escalation continued. I heard the knock before I saw her, sharp and deliberate, 3 times in a row, the kind of knock that is meant to announce authority, not request entry. When I opened the door, Claire was standing there again, but this time without the sunglasses, her expression clearer, more intense, like she wanted to see my reaction without anything in the way. The officers were back too, different ones this time, standing a few steps behind her, hands resting casually, but eyes alert, already assessing the situation. She did not waste time. "This is your final warning," she said, holding out another document, this one with a signature line already filled, already processed through whatever internal system she believed gave it weight. "You have been given multiple opportunities to comply. This property is no longer available for your occupancy under community regulations." Her voice was steady, but there was something underneath it now, something tighter, like she was pushing just a little harder than before, trying to force the outcome she had already decided on. I took the paper but did not look at it right away. Instead, I glanced at the officers, then back at her, measuring the space between what she was claiming and what they were actually prepared to enforce. That gap was still there, still wide enough. The porch light buzzed faintly above us again, that low electrical hum constant, steady, like everything else that was quietly building beneath the surface. Claire stepped closer, lowering her voice just enough that it felt more personal now. Less performance, more pressure. "You should have handled this weeks ago," she said, almost under her breath. I met her gaze for a moment, calm, steady, giving her exactly what she expected to see. Someone finally cornered, finally running out of options. And she believed it. That was the part that mattered most. Because the more she believed she had already won, the less careful she became. And right now, she was not being careful at all. I could tell the moment she crossed it, that invisible line between enforcement and overreach. And it did not happen with a loud announcement or some dramatic shift. It happened quietly, in the details she thought no one would notice, in the way her documents started referencing authority she did not actually have, in the way her confidence began to outpace the rules she claimed to represent. That afternoon, after she left my porch with that final warning still hanging in the air, I stepped back inside and closed the door slowly, the latch clicking into place with a soft, definitive sound that echoed through the empty living room. The house was still, cool air circulating through the vents, carrying that faint scent of new drywall and fresh paint that had not fully faded yet. And for a moment, everything felt almost disconnected from what was happening outside, like two separate worlds running on different rules. I set the papers down on the kitchen counter, stacking them neatly, every notice, every letter, every printed demand she had sent over the past few weeks, all aligned edge to edge like a timeline she had unknowingly built for me. The ceiling fan hummed above, slow and steady, blades cutting through the air with a rhythmic whisper that matched the pace of my thoughts. This was the part she did not understand. She thought pressure created urgency. She thought deadlines forced mistakes. But what pressure actually does, when applied long enough, is reveal structure. It shows where things are solid and where they are not. And her structure had gaps. I picked up my phone and made the first call, not rushed, not hidden, just deliberate, the kind of call that does not need to be explained out loud. The line rang twice before it connected, a familiar voice on the other end, calm, professional, already aware of the situation without needing a full explanation. I gave them the address, the timeline, the escalation points, and there was a brief pause, just long enough for them to confirm what I already knew. "She filed under HOA enforcement authority?" they asked. I glanced at the top page on the counter, the bold heading she had been so proud of. "That is what she believes," I said. Another pause, shorter this time, followed by a quiet response that carried more weight than anything Claire had said all day. "Understood. Proceed as planned." The call ended with a soft tone, and I set the phone down next to the stack of papers, letting the silence settle again. Outside, a car passed slowly, tires rolling over asphalt with a low, steady sound, and I could hear distant voices somewhere down the block, neighbors going about their routines while this entire situation unfolded just out of sight. I walked over to the small desk in the corner, opened the drawer, and pulled out a thin folder, nothing flashy, just clean, organized, the kind of document set that does not draw attention until it absolutely needs to. Inside were copies, signatures, dates, ownership structures that traced back further than anyone in this neighborhood probably realized. I flipped through them once, not to check, but to confirm, to feel the weight of what was already in place long before Claire ever stepped onto my porch with her clipboard and her assumptions. The porch light flickered again as the afternoon shifted toward evening, casting longer shadows across the floor, and I could almost picture her right now, somewhere nearby, maybe at the clubhouse, maybe on a call, reinforcing her position, telling someone that everything was under control, that enforcement was moving forward exactly as planned. She believed she was closing the case. She believed she was about to remove a problem from her community. What she did not realize was that she had just documented every step of her own overreach, in writing, in meetings, in official notices that carried her name and her authority across every page. I closed the folder carefully and set it beside the stack of her notices, the two piles sitting side by side on the counter, one built on assumption, the other on actual control. And for the first time since she taped that final notice to my door, I allowed myself a small, quiet acknowledgement of what was coming next. Because the moment she tried to enforce something she did not have the legal ground to enforce, the entire situation stopped being about compliance. It became about jurisdiction. And jurisdiction was not something she understood nearly as well as she thought she did. By early evening, the neighborhood had shifted again, not louder, not chaotic, just heavier, like the air itself was waiting for something to happen, and I could feel it the moment I stepped back onto the porch, the faint hum of streetlights flickering on one by one, casting long amber reflections across the pavement. Claire's patrol car was back at the curb, engine off this time, windows dark, like a placeholder more than a presence, and that told me she was confident enough to think she did not need the constant backup anymore. Confidence like that always comes right before a mistake. I stood there for a second, letting the cool air settle against my skin, listening to the distant rhythm of a basketball bouncing somewhere down the block, the soft echo bouncing off garages and fences, normal. Life continuing just outside the edge of what she had created. Then I noticed the envelope on the mailbox, not taped, not hidden, just placed there like it belonged, thicker than the others, heavier, and when I picked it up, I recognized the formatting immediately. Not HOA stationery, not her usual style. This one was printed through a third-party service, designed to look official at a higher level, complete with legal formatting and a return address that tried a little too hard to appear legitimate. I opened it slowly, the paper sliding free with a soft, controlled sound, and read through the contents once, then again, confirming what I already suspected. She had escalated beyond internal enforcement. She had filed a preliminary eviction claim through a local processing service, bypassing the actual ownership structure entirely, assuming that her position gave her the authority to initiate it. That was the moment everything aligned. The porch light buzzed above me again, steady and constant, while I folded the document and slipped it into the same pocket as the others, the stack growing thicker with every step she took. Inside, the house felt quieter than before, the kind of quiet that comes when something is about to shift, and I walked straight to the counter where the two piles still sat, her notices on one side, my documents on the other, perfectly separated, perfectly clear. I added the new letter to her stack, aligning it carefully, and for a second, I just looked at them, the contrast between assumption and authority sitting inches apart. Then I picked up my folder again, opened it to the section I had been waiting to use, and pulled out the single document that mattered most, the one with the signature that carried actual weight, the one tied directly to the property, the structure, the entire block she believed she controlled. The paper felt different in my hand, thicker, older, not recently printed but maintained, verified, recorded long before any HOA board had ever written a single bylaw in this neighborhood. I placed it on top of my stack and stepped back, letting the reality of it settle in for a moment. Outside, a car door closed, footsteps moved along the sidewalk, voices low and curious, the kind of quiet attention that builds when people sense something is about to unfold. I checked the time on my phone, not rushed, just confirming alignment, and saw the message already waiting, short, direct, exactly what I expected. They were in position. I set the phone down, straightened the papers one last time, and headed back toward the door, the floorboards creaking softly under each step, every movement deliberate, controlled, timed. As I opened the door again, the night air felt cooler, sharper, carrying that faint mix of cut grass and distant pavement heat, and I could see her now at the end of the driveway, walking toward me with that same measured pace, clipboard in hand again, officers trailing just behind, ready to finish what she had started. She looked certain, completely certain, and that was exactly where I needed her to be, because the next step was not hers anymore. Claire stopped about 6 feet from the bottom step, close enough for the porch light to catch every detail of her expression, and for the first time since she showed up on my property, I noticed something subtle shift in her eyes, not doubt, not yet, but a tightening, like she could feel something was not lining up the way it should. The officers behind her remained still, hands resting at their belts, posture neutral, waiting for direction that had not been clearly established, and that hesitation hung in the air thicker than anything she had said so far. The night had settled in fully now, the soft hum of insects filling the silence between words, streetlights casting long shadows across the driveway, and somewhere in the distance a garage door rolled shut with a low mechanical rumble. Claire lifted her clipboard again, flipping to the top page with a practiced motion, her bracelets clinking softly as she steadied it against her arm. "This is your final compliance check," she said, voice controlled, measured, but slightly louder than necessary. projecting for anyone still watching from behind their windows. You have failed to vacate within the required time frame. An enforcement action is now in effect. She extended the document toward me, expecting the same reaction she had been building toward for weeks, expecting resistance or panic or at least confusion. Instead, I did something she had not prepared for. I did not reach for her paper. I let it hang there between us for a second, then slowly shook my head once, calm, deliberate, like I was correcting a simple misunderstanding. The porch light buzzed faintly above us, steady and constant, and I could feel the attention from the street settle more heavily on this moment, the quiet audience sensing that something was about to break the pattern. "You cannot enforce that," I said, my voice even, not raised, not rushed, just clear enough to carry. The officers exchanged a quick glance, subtle but unmistakable, the first visible crack in the situation she thought she controlled. Claire's expression hardened immediately, her chin lifting slightly as she adjusted her stance. "I have full authority under HOA regulations," she replied, sharper now, less rehearsed, more reactive. "This property falls under community jurisdiction." I let a small pause sit between us, just long enough for her words to settle, just long enough for the officers to process what she had claimed, and then I reached into my jacket and pulled out the folder. Not rushed, not dramatic, just deliberate. The paper inside caught the light as I opened it, thicker stock, official seal pressed into the corner, the kind of document that does not need explanation once it is seen. I stepped forward one pace and held it out, not to her, but to the officer closest to her right. He hesitated for a fraction of a second before taking it, his fingers brushing the edge carefully, instinctively treating it with more weight than anything she had handed him all evening. The sound of the paper shifting in his hands was quiet but sharp in the stillness, and I watched his eyes move across the page, line by line, the neutral expression beginning to change, slowly, almost imperceptibly at first. Claire noticed it too. Of course she did. "What is that?" she asked, her voice tightening just enough to betray the first hint of uncertainty. The officer did not answer immediately. He read the document again, more carefully this time, then looked up at me, then back at her, and that was the moment everything shifted. "Ma'am," he said, turning slightly toward Claire, his tone no longer neutral, no longer waiting, but controlled in a different way now, grounded in something more solid than assumption. "This property is not under HOA eviction authority." The words landed clean, precise, cutting through everything she had built over the past few weeks. Claire blinked once, then again, like her mind was trying to catch up to what she was hearing. "That is not possible," she said quickly, stepping forward, reaching for the document. But the officer held it just out of reach, not aggressively, just enough to maintain control of the situation. "This entire block is governed by the association." I finally spoke again, meeting her gaze directly, steady, calm, the same way I had been from the start. "The association manages appearance," I said. "It does not own the property." The air felt different now, sharper, clearer, like the pressure had shifted directions entirely, and for the first time since she walked up my driveway, Claire was not the one controlling the pace of the conversation. She was reacting to it, and she was not ready for that. For a moment, no one said anything, and the silence that followed was heavier than anything Claire had brought with her, pressing down on the space between us while the officer continued holding the document like it had just rewritten the entire situation. The porch light flickered once, then steadied, casting a clean glow across the paper, the embossed seal catching just enough reflection to make it impossible to ignore. Claire's hand hovered mid-air where she had tried to reach for it, fingers slightly curled, like she had not fully decided whether to pull back or push forward, and that hesitation told me everything. The officer cleared his throat quietly, shifting his stance just enough to reposition himself between us, not as a barrier, but as a reset, like the scene had changed roles without anyone announcing it. "Ma'am," he said again, more firmly this time, "this document indicates that the property ownership structure is held under a private management entity, and eviction authority rests solely with that entity, not the HOA." The words were measured, careful, but definitive, and I watched Claire's expression tighten as she processed them, her confidence searching for something to hold on to, and finding less with every second. "That is not correct," she replied, but the sharpness was gone now, replaced with something thinner, something strained. The association has jurisdiction over all residential compliance. The officer did not argue. He simply turned the document slightly, pointing to a section near the bottom, letting the printed language speak for itself. I could see her eyes track the movement, read the lines, pause, then read them again, slower this time, as the realization started to settle in. I stepped forward just enough to close the distance by a single step, keeping my voice calm, level, exactly where it had been from the start. Compliance and ownership are not the same thing, I said, letting each word land without force, without urgency. You can enforce appearance standards. You cannot remove a resident from a property you do not own. The night air felt cooler now, sharper, carrying the faint scent of damp grass and distant asphalt, and I could hear more movement from the street, subtle shifts as people adjusted behind their windows, watching the balance turn. Claire lowered her hand slowly, her grip tightening around the clipboard instead, the plastic edge pressing into her palm as if it could still anchor her to the authority she thought she had. "Who are you?" she asked finally, the question quiet but edged with something real now, something that had not been there before. I held her gaze for a second, then reached into the folder again and pulled out the final page, the one tied directly to her property, her address printed clearly, her name listed under tenancy, structured under the same management entity she had just tried to bypass. I did not hand it to her. I handed it to the officer. He took it with the same careful motion, eyes moving across the page, then lifting again, slower this time, more deliberate. "Ma'am," he said, turning back toward her, "this indicates your residence is leased under the same ownership structure." The words settled into the air like weight, quiet but undeniable. Claire's shoulders stiffened, her posture adjusting as if she was trying to hold on to something that was already slipping away. "That is irrelevant," she said quickly, but even she could hear it now, the gap between what she was saying and what was actually documented. I let the silence stretch one last time before answering. Not loud, not forceful, just clear. "It is not irrelevant," I said. "It is the entire structure." The officer glanced between us once more, then made a small, decisive nod, the kind that closes a situation without needing anything louder. "This matter is not enforceable under HOA authority," he said, stepping back slightly. "Any further action would need to be handled through the proper ownership channel." Claire did not respond right away.